My next little thing is family life, right? And working on a traditional film set at the moment is a 12-hour day, and often it goes longer, and that's a lot of time. And it's very hard to plan some things. Like the way I can guarantee that I will get a job is if I book a vacation, you know, like as a freelance person, like that's when you get offered a job. So that can make planning hard if you have a partner or friends, you know, that want to plan a vacation with you, or you want to go on this cool date night, or and then you get offered to do a job, like you're going to be tempted to say yes because you don't get offered jobs that much. Or if you say no, then the client might end up finding someone else they really like working with. So it's just a reality. A hard reality is all successful women cinematographers I know with children can do it because their partner takes care of the kids. All right, we talked a little bit about, do you want to make passion your career? Because it is full of a lot of compromises, right? And this is an interesting thing my sister said to me once, right? She was doing this process at her school that was kind of like stepping back with the question why. So at that time in her life, she really wanted to be a photographer for National Geographic. Like that was the dream. And then the practice is, you know, you take whatever your dream or sentence is and you say why. So why does she want to be a photographer for National Geographic? And she said because she really likes that creative outlet. But if that's the real reason, and you can keep going back from that, right? So like, she wants to be a photographer because she really likes taking pictures. And why does she really like taking pictures? Because she really likes the creative outlet. It's important to her to have that expression. But if that's like the truth of it, then she doesn't have to compete with thousands of other people for one job to be a photographer for National Geographic. Like if the real reason push behind it is to take photos and to have a creative outlet, when she has a camera, she can just take photos. And if it's to have a creative outlet, you don't even need a camera. Like you could paint a picture. And so it's not to like talk us out of doing big things and following our dream, but it's maybe just suggesting that we take a pause and think about why you're doing it. And something I think about a lot, right, is filmmaking. Narrative filmmaking is an absurdly complicated art form. You know, like if only I was a painter, I could hang up this call and go upstairs and paint a picture, and then I have made my art. But to make a film, you know, I need a sound person, I need like, you know, 6 other people, I need a script. Like it's very complicated. So it'd be nice to, you know, maybe to have to like follow something that's like much more accessible. All right. Yeah, keeping with I don't know why I put this in this category, but I think something else I never thought about is like I can't do this forever. Like I'm 39 and I feel totally fit, but like 10 years at like 50, can you still like, it's very hard. Like literally the act of filmmaking, I'm in particular a cinematographer, like you're holding a very heavy camera all day. And even if you're not someone that's like actually holding gear, you are on your feet all day. So that's probably not something we can all do forever as we get older. And anything could happen in our lives. You know, I could like pull my back out tomorrow and like there goes my career, how I make money, a lot of how I find meaning in my life. I don't mean to be negative, but I'm just saying that's a reality that happens to some people, right? And so to put like a more positive spin on it, maybe you cultivate other talents and passions as you do this, right? So I work as a cinematographer. I really like it. I also write for articles for different magazines about film. And that's just like, that's something I can do from home. That's something I can do from anywhere. That's something that doesn't require physical labor. Maybe that's like a fallback option or just like a fun option. I can go with Ireland or something. All right. This is all in our category of deciding. Let's see if this is, or things to just like think about that I don't think a lot of us do. So the next is emotional. And I have to negotiate every job that I do. And often, you know, if it's on a big level, maybe the filmmaker's agent is this also like, please interrupt me at any time if you don't understand a term. If you have, we're gonna do questions, pause for questions in a second, but please, if there's something that like, you're like, what the fuck's this guy? Like, please ask me. So yeah, so emotionally, like negotiating is hard. And on a bigger level project, maybe the cinematographer's agent negotiates with the producer. And then the cinematographer and the director can have a loving, great creative relationship. But in my experience, more realistically, I'm often hired directly by the director. And that means that me and the person that I'm supposed to have this great creative collaboration with, almost before we do any of that, we're having this like monetary business negotiation. And it kind of sucks, it has an effect on the relationship you have. And so like, I'm very happy I'm freelance, but I understand the appeal of someone that has a job, it's 9 to 5, that once they negotiated their rate and all the terms for it, and then they just go do it. They don't have to think about it after, 5 at night every day. Whereas every time I'm a little bit reinventing the wheel with someone, we're deciding how we're going to work together. And that can be tricky. And because I like working on documentaries that are good causes, and I like working on narrative film, very often people are coming to me with like their like passion project, like their lifeblood. They put all this effort and time and they really care about this, either because it's their artistic expression or because it's really important. This documentary focused on the social justice issue. And, if I could shoot them all for free, I would, but I can't. And so then you're negotiating with someone who like has probably been giving absurd amount of times of free labor and time to this thing they really care about. And so it's, it's just a little tricky, and it's often a little tricky. I put in my day rate. How much money I make ranges wildly. And I'm sure some people like pick a number and they're like, look, this is my rate, that's it. But I have very different numbers that I'm down to take for different types of work. If you're a corporate interview or if you're a good cause documentary, that's a different number in my head. But it's also kind of like wild and taxing to decide where everything falls. So just as like an example of the spread, one day last fall, I think the most I've ever made in a day for just me is $1,800, which is insane. That's a huge amount of money to me. I have male cinematographer friends that make $2,500 in a day for a commercial or something. But one day last fall, I made $1,200 for just me without gear. And last week, a friend of mine asked me to work for $400 a day with bringing about $500 worth like gear that would cost $500 to rent. So you could think of that as negative $100 if you were trying to be negative. So it's just like, it's just reinventing the wheel so many times, and maybe that's just a reality of what working freelance is like. And maybe that's something that makes you very anxious and you don't want to do. And so like, I don't know, think about it. All right. So I think I only have like 2 categories left in this, things to think about. Then it's like, what job do you want on set, right? Or in the film world, there's a huge range, right? I think probably a lot of people are like filmmakers and you think directing, but then there's so many different things to do. And many of them are on set, like camera or art design or sound. And many of them are film adjacent, like writing articles about film or reading scripts, right? There's a lot. And so, you could think about what you like doing. Do you really like socializing? Maybe being on sets for you. I love like the vibe of set. Like I'm great in like chaos and high energy, and I'm not very good working alone and editing something. It's just hard for me to have like the deadlines. It's hard to make myself do it, but someone else that might really work for them. Okay, I'm gonna not, if you already read this, too late, but that's my depressing note about climate change. None of this matters. There's no such thing as a 5-year plan. Don't worry about it. All right, let's see. Other things that are also really hard, I think, in the filmmaking process are raising money. I think that's the hardest thing. Like everyone, it's great, you've written a script, you have this great idea, but it actually takes a lot of money to make a film, right? Because you're not going upstairs after this call and painting a picture. You're hiring a number of crew. Even if you're not hiring crew, even if you have your friends doing it, you're paying for food, you're paying for props. It's a lot. So I think that's like a generally difficult thing. The freelance hustle we kind of talked about. This one's tough, but it's really true. I remember I went to this talk by, I went to this like kind of intimate like salon experience of like 10 people in someone's house. And the woman who was hosting it worked for a really high-end talk show. And the main takeaway I remember from her talk was no one cares about you directing except you, like no. And she meant it a little bit more in a positive way. Like you have to hustle, right? You have to make your own buck. But I think it might be really good to absorb. Like no one's invested in you being this creative except you. And you really have to work for it. And you really have to like, if that's what you want to do, if you want to direct movies, like you really have to like put yourself out there a lot. And there's going to be a lot of no's before you finally, and a lot of maybes before you finally get to your yes. Okay, freelance versus steady job. I love being freelance. I'm in Mexico right now. Yesterday I was planning with friends like when I'm going to go to this bluegrass festival, when I'm going to go to this other festival. I have a boyfriend that has a steady job, so it's all like, all right, well, I guess you can come for the weekend, but I'm going to go. So like, I absolutely love it. That said, there's certainly pluses and minuses to it, right? Like in a way, I don't work a lot. So I guess one potential minus is I don't make a lot of money, but on the plus side, I don't work a lot, so I can do a lot of other interesting things. But yeah, it's sort of the way, if you have a full-time job, I assume, right? Like you have this structure and you're not reinventing the wheel all the time. And I remember when I first heard of paid time off, like people get paid when they're not working. That hasn't happened to me in 15 years, So there's just pluses to and minuses to both. And you could certainly have a steady job in the film industry, right? Like you could be a writer for an HBO series or something, but I love freelance. Like I would never try to get a steady job now, but there's just like these things that I didn't think about at all before I decided this is my career. All right, let's see. Okay, cool. We're near the end here. You can think about where to live, right? A lot of people go to LA or to New York. You certainly don't have to. You could be a bigger fish in a smaller pond. I worked in San Francisco recently, and I was very surprised that their rates were higher than New York. I think because there's less crew and there's more corporate stuff, but that was like a surprise. Like it's not necessarily better to be in one of these other places. In a way, it's kind of like New York, you have too many people, right? Like if I say, oh, my rate is $800 a day, you can find someone else with a little less experience that will do it for 500 or 350, right? I think another big question for a lot of people is whether or not you want to own gear. This might be a little bit more just about my experience, right? As a photographer, that's something that comes up. I don't think it comes up that often in other roles. But just kind of briefly, like a lot of people will buy an expensive camera and then call themselves a DP. And maybe they don't have that experience. And there's pluses and minuses to that, right? Like when the Red camera came out, maybe 10 years ago, it was kind of the first time that a really high-end digital camera was close to affordable, right? It was no longer $500,000. It was maybe 60,000 or 100,000, so you could get a loan for it. And there were people that I knew that were not as good cinematographers as me, that like objectively, that bought these cameras and then were getting better jobs than I was because they were bringing the camera kind of for free. And at first, you could be kind of bitter about that. But after a number of years, because some of them were my friends, they got much better than me because they had a lot more practice because they were shooting features that were like crappy features because they're hiring a DP that doesn't have a lot of experience, but they were really getting experience from it. So I just think briefly, like something to think about is, I think the positives of owning gear is you have a camera, you can make a project whenever you want, you get a little bit of rental from it, you might get hired for the jobs. because they want someone with a camera, and you'll work and you'll learn more. I think a negative, not necessarily a negative, but I think something people don't think of is depending on how much you get, it can kind of take over your life. A friend of mine was a DP and he started buying lighting gear, and now he is a very successful lighting rental house owner. And I don't think he shoots very much, right? Because it became more of a priority to like monetize this investment he made. And also, no one ever let's say I own a C300 and the average rental rate for it is, $400. No one's ever like, oh, hey, can I rent your camera for $400? Everyone's always like, oh, hey, can you just bring that with you? So it's a way to make some money in rental, but it's just like a mindset, right? A lot of people's mindset are like, oh, you already have a camera, great. If I didn't steal it off the truck, I got it to like rental it. All right, and so finally in this section, because I felt like I was focusing way too much on the negative of film and being a freelancer, here are some things I like about it. Yeah, I do really love being a freelancer and having free time choosing when I want to work on a project or not. And if I like the people and if I like the content, like it's a huge luxury. A lot of time it's making art. A lot of time I'm making meaning, right? Like film is storytelling. You're in a way, big picture, you can think of it as crafting culture, right? If I make something that gets seen, that gets played on PBS, then I'm contributing to something a lot of people see, and the subtle ways that I imprint myself or subtle ways that I put things on it, like maybe really impact the world. It's pretty dope. A lot of stuff you make doesn't get seen, but when it works, it's great. It's fun, it's intellectual. I really love the creative collaboration of it. I love the relationship between me and the director. I love the relationship between me and the gaffer, the lighting person. Like when that's good, those are really good. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of chaotic energy, and it's really interesting. Like, if people ask me what I do for work, I say I do half documentary and half narrative and a lot of other stuff. But like, I absolutely love how I just get to drop into other people's worlds sometimes, right? So as a documentary filmmaker, as a documentary director, you probably have like one focus that you do for years. It takes a long time to make a lot of docs. But as a cinematographer, that one focus that they do for years is now going to realize in this 1 week shoot in Mississippi, and I get to come, and I'm having like homemade dinner at this family's house in Mississippi, or I'm in this conference room with the presidents of Argentina and Uruguay and Brazil having a conference on corruption somewhere in New York. Like you find yourself in these rooms or in these like episodic life experiences that I think are really fascinating. All right, I'm a little tired of hearing myself talk, so let's take a short break. And does anyone have any questions or comments about any of the above? That's fine, but let's take a second while you think about it. All right. I'll share my screen again. I'm a little bit losing my voice. I'm going to keep trying to do this, but just to make you panic, I might ask volunteers to read these if I can. So,
cool. I can monitor.
Okay.
Yeah, I can monitor the chat. So Reese McKee asked, what's one of your favorite projects that you've worked on recently?
This is not recent, but my favorite project that I worked on, recently is I shot a trailer for a feature film, a narrative feature film, and it's a black and white noir, and I love it. And in real life, I don't get to do a lot of black. That's probably my second black and white in 15 years, my first noir film. Yeah, it was really, really great. And another comment I'll say that I think I have somewhere else in this presentation about following your heart is I went, I think a lot of times when I used to like attend panels like this or workshops like this, right? Like you kind of want to be like, how do I do it? How do I do X? And in this field, everyone's just like, let me tell you my very specific way that I did it that won't apply to your life at all because it's very specific. And I just think that's like a reality of this field. There's like no direct line. But the demonstrations, the protests and demonstrations that were happening at Standard Rock, which I don't know if everyone remembers, but it was a demonstration against an oil pipeline that was going through an indigenous community. And it maybe about 5 years ago, it really kind of caught international attention. And a lot of people went out to support this thing. And I'd heard about it. And I think I got hired. I like worked for free for 5 days. And I went out and I was the cinematographer on someone's longer documentary project where they were just filming this thing for 5 days. And I went out there and I was so inspired by it that after 5 days, I bought an RV and I started an LLC. And I went back and I was like, hey, my goal is to increase media coverage of this event because I think that will help the people that are here. And through that, and that was like, I was out there for 4 months and it was one of the most like intense experiences of my life for a number of reasons. I'm really glad I did it. And not why I did it, but two results of that is footage from what I shot there, what I filmed there, ended up in a lot of different places, but 2 places that it ended up were in 2 different documentaries that screened at Sundance and one won an award. You know, and that's not why I did it, but now suddenly I have like work that screened at Sundance. And I made like a Kickstarter, and one of my cinematographer friends shared it with a famous actor and he shared it. And so like I made all my basic expenses were covered. I made $8,000. It covered the RV, it covered this stuff. And so I'm just saying like that was a moment when like I had no plan, no plan. Like I just thought this was important and I did it. And it worked out like fascinatingly. I mean, it's very complicated for a lot of different reasons, but that's not your question, but that's just something I wanted to say because it was an example of like, all right, like I'm gonna really try to do this thing I really care about and we'll see how it goes. And it went really well. All right, do we have, okay, cool, awesome. I'm gonna go to my next section. Let's see. Hi, Troy. I know, I thought yeah, glad to see you. All right, so we're screen sharing again. All right, and this, all right, so this next thing is top 15 lessons learned. And the caveat, right, is of course rules are made to be broken, but these are things that I think everyone's a silly thing to say. These are things that I think most people I know that have worked in film for a period of time would take as no-brainers, you know? And I think one thing about advice, right, that I've like learned as I've gotten older, it's like you can hear something, but like sometimes you just got to go through it to internalize it. But I'm gonna screenshot this or send me an email, I'll send it to you. These are things that I think are really obvious. Be nice. Use professional sound. Everyone I know has a story about, you know, their passion project film that they made where everyone worked for free, including the sound person, and it didn't work out. That's, you know, sound, people that know what they're doing in sound don't work for free. Like it's just a thing. Fix it in post is a joke. Don't fix, you can't, I mean, sometimes you can fix it in post, but like if you're at that point, fix it in prep. This one's really true. The more time you have to film, the better your movie will be. If you're shooting 5 pages in a day, okay. If you're shooting 1 page in a day, you have so much more time to make directorial choices and to have the actors do it again, and the cinematographer has so much time to light it better. Whereas if you're cramming in 8 pages to a day, it's just like it's like literally a graph, you know. The more prep you do, the better your movie will be, right? Like the more thought you put into the beginning, the more, if you have a shot list, you don't have to follow those rules when you're on set, but if you can abandon them then, but I cannot recommend enough thinking about stuff a lot ahead of time before you get to set. And maybe a good example, right, is we just did this 24-hour film festival. I don't know if any of you did that too, right? But I made a whole movie in 24 hours and it's terrible, you know, and the shots are terrible because you just kind of show up and you're like, how do I cover the scene? Okay, I'll shoot this and I'll shoot this and I'll shoot this. And I have it, it's safe. But if, you know, if you'd had more time to be like, oh, and then I could really slowly push in on the ring that the girlfriend gave him before her mother died, you know, it would just be like way better if you thought about it a lot more. Feed your crew well. And that goes with respect basic crew care. And like, you had the short film that you wrote and you care about it so much. No one else cares about it as much as you know? And like the lighting person you have working for you that day is working for another job tomorrow. And because you said, you know, oh, I want to go 14 hours instead of 12, like every job wants more from them, from your crew, right? The more time you have, the better. So it's easy to like push and push and push a little, but I just think like a way of being a good person and also having your crew on your side is respecting them and respecting these lines and, you know, putting a little bit of extra money into getting better pizza or whatever it is. And nothing can crash a film faster than like the crew whining and being disgruntled, sincerely or not. It's an obvious one, but it's about the story, right? It doesn't matter what camera you're using. Like none of that matters. Like baseline, you want to be making quality content. A big thing that I don't know if this is exactly still a thing, but I think so. When I left William & Mary and I moved to New York City and I wanted to start getting experience shooting stuff, and I was probably looking on Craigslist. Something that happens is people will be like, "Oh, we'll pay you," and you know, we won't pay you, but we'll cover credit and transportation, and please bring your camera for free. Our movie's going to win Sundance. And like, it's not. And any producer that is selling you that is either manipulative or delusional. And it isn't maybe the person that you want to have a working relationship with. Networking is about following up, right? I'm terrible at networking. You can go to a networking party and you can chat to a lot of people and have a great time. None of that counts unless you reach out to them afterwards in a good way. I want to tell you guys this brief aside story. There's this famous DP named Fred Elms. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he shot a couple of David Lynch movies. He's a big time DP and he used to be a mentor of mine. And one time I was shooting on the Alexa, this new camera for the first time. And I called him up and I had some very technical questions. I was like, oh, I want to expose the whites. Where on my RRE graph, like technary camera graph, do I put the whites in the Alexa? And I think he told me, he gave me his opinion on it in a sentence. And then he said, if you and the director have a disagreement, if you disagree about something, the director is probably right because they've thought about it more. And he talked about that for like 15 minutes. And what I maybe in retrospect really appreciated is sometimes a mentor maybe is there to tell you the questions you don't know to ask, right? Like it's much more important actually in my life for me to absorb this knowledge about like, oh yeah, the director's usually probably right, than it is to know exactly where to set this one proper exposure. And so that's like a lot, that was kind of some of my thinking of this presentation, right? Is it's not like how to get a job, but it's like, oh, maybe you should be thinking about this. So going into that, and sorry if it's a little bit like, I did think of it as like, if I was telling my sister, right? So it is a confidence game, right? Like all your life, I think people are going to say it's about confidence, right? Asking a girl or a guy is about confidence. And I never really stopped and thought about the flip side of that, right? The kind of the flip side is there's certainly people in my life that talk about things with confidence that I've presumed those things were true. And then as I have gained more knowledge and life experience, I'm like, oh, they're not true. They're just that person's opinion, right? Like a friend of mine that knows a lot about lenses, and I think he's being very helpful to me in teaching me about lenses. And then when I learned more about lenses, I was like, oh, I actually know more than this person. And this is just his opinion about it. It's usually white men, let's be honest. But it, you know, it can be all of us. So I guess what I'm saying here is I think you both need to be open to like knowing that most things people tell you are their opinions and it can be worth like pausing and being like, great, that's great information, but it's not fact. And on the flip side, like if someone came up to me today and said, hey, I want to shoot a beer commercial with green screen. Can you do it? Like, I know I can do it. So I would very confidently say yes, but I haven't done it. So I'm a little bit like, sometimes you're selling yourself on something you can do, but you haven't done. And then sometimes you're selling yourself on something you can do, or you might not be able to do and you haven't done. So I think, yeah, I'm not telling you what to do with it, but a lot of it really is a confidence game, and something that gets talked about a bit, at least for cinematographers, male and female, is how men are more likely to say they can do it when they haven't, and women aren't, right? Like if one of you on this call approached me about this beer commercial, I probably would say, oh no, I haven't done that, but I've shot these other things that are very similar and I feel really confident I can do it, right? Or someone else might be like, absolutely, I can do it. And if they can, that might serve their career well, because then they do it and it works out. And if, yeah, so I don't know. I think that's what we're thinking about. I think that's worth thinking about from how confidently you want to portray yourself, and also how people are portraying themselves to you. We said this before, no one wants you to be a director but you. If this is something you're going into, you're really going to have to fight for it. Again, these are just kind of top 15 lessons learned. A scene at sunset is really hard to film. It doesn't sound so deep, but it's just an experience a lot of people I know have had. It's a beautiful time. You write it in your script and then you're like, oh, I actually only have 15 minutes to film a whole scene. You can't do all the jobs yourself at 100%, right? I'm a cinematographer. I can do that really well. Sometimes I get hired to be a crew of one. So now I'm shooting, I'm doing sound, I'm producing and making, I'm covering production and making sure like it's staged across the street, and I'm directing and trying to think about the content. And you can't do, those are all full-time jobs. And I certainly like do those kinds of shoots, but I'm not doing any of them at my full capacity. And you start dropping the lower ones, right? Like, who cares about the cinematography if I'm now also in charge of the content, right? So and I'm sure, a lot of us are tempted to go film things that are just us because that's the option we have. But I certainly noticed that the cinematography isn't as good, that, you're just not, you can't do everything 100%. Hire people better than you, right? If I get to hire a lighting person, I would love them to be better than I am. Like, I want to learn from their knowledge. Say when you don't know, just ask. Just if someone asks you to go do something you don't know what it is, just ask them. They tell you, it's great. Oh, this is a little caveat, unless you're the director, in which case I would still say just ask. But sometimes a big part of being a director is just needing to decide things. And if you're like me and a very indecisive person, I remember hearing some talk, I think it's on Dance, and some famous director, a woman was saying, if someone comes up to her and says, should the curtains be red or blue? She thinks of her job as needing to decide, and it's okay if she's wrong, but she can't be like, oh, I'm not sure, because then no one can go make the curtains. You have to be like blue. And then next week, when it looks bad, you can be like, I was wrong. Let's make them in red, or let's shoot in a different direction. All right, no assholes on set. If you're in a position to hire people, don't hire jerks. I have this director film friend that I've worked with on like 3 or 4 projects, and that's her role. And it's a great role. Like, who wants to be around jerks? All right, let's do a very short pause for if anyone has questions or comments, if you want to read them out. And if you have other things, like this set of 15 that you want to holler out, great. I'd love to hear them.
Right, cool. Nicole asks, in documentary, how early do you prefer to get involved in your pre-production to give you the time you need to work with director and plan for how you're going to shoot the project? What does that collaborative process look like?
Sure. Documentary is very different than narrative, right? Because it's often this really long ongoing thing that can take years. For me, the earlier the better, right? Because then you get to be involved creatively, you get to set up some of the structural you do for the project, right? Often documentary kind of can default to like, oh, you'll just go shoot it, right? But in a lot of good documentary, there's also still like a very clear style of how you're filming it, right? So if I was going to get to be the person to like be in charge of that visual, then yeah, the sooner the better. Because if you can't do a shoot, then someone else already has this like visual style. That said, I think a lot of directors don't approach me in the very beginning, right? Because like they know it's your time, and maybe it doesn't make sense to approach someone until it's like close to the shoot, to the filming. I'm trying to, it's really hard is I'm trying to stop using violent words and talking about film. And so many of them are pretty violent. Like, oh, we shot it. Oh, the shooter. What does that collaborative process look like? Yeah, I mean, I kind of approach it the way I do a narrative and thinking out like, oh, what do we want the different like styles and looks to be? But that's certainly a luxury, and it depends on your style. It depends on what you're shooting. But often it's a little bit more like something interesting is happening now, and that's what inspires someone to go film it. And then you build off that. Oh yeah, union major. Okay, I'm going to. Sure. How has my major helped me in my job? I'm going to answer these two, and then I'm going to do my third little section, and then we can do a Q&A. I am 39. When I left college at 20-ish and moved to New York City, 0% was the percent that having a film degree factored into my life. Hysterically, I think, like at the time, I probably thought like, oh man, if I had just skipped college and moved right to New York City, I'd be 4 years ahead. And that's there's some accuracy to that, but it's also kind of a like childish thought to have, right? Like obviously I gained a lot of like knowledge. The way I think about my degree from William and Mary, which was English and I don't know if it's quite the same, but literary and cultural studies, film studies track, is it really taught me how to think. And that's probably like really annoying for people I interact with, because you're a didactic lawyer type arguer. But as a life skill, like it really taught me how to think critically about topics. And I think that's really served me over the course of my life. And I made a lot of good friends. And so I think probably it's true. When I first moved to New York, I was like, man, I'd be 4 years ahead if I just skipped school and I'd just come here and started making films for people. But as I've gotten older, right, like presumably because of who I am who I became during this like stage in my life that was very critically developmentally, surely that has impacted like the choices I've made and the stuff I've done along the way. No, but nobody cares about my major. Like no job has ever been like, oh cool, where'd you go to school? And and I have it on a resume, but I don't really use resumes so much that much. It's mostly like my portfolio and reel. William and Mary is a very good school. People out in the world know William and Mary and think of it as a very good school. So this little thing happens in their head. No offense if anyone isn't attending William and Mary on this call. They're like, oh, cool, William and Mary. Am I part of a union? Why or why not? Big question. I am not currently part of a union. I was part of the camera union. The camera union you can dishonorably discharge. I wanted to talk briefly about unions, but I don't have a ton of time. They're all different types. The camera union does not help you find work. Union jobs do have a set of rules that those jobs operate under, right? So like, I know if I'm doing a union job, I'm going to get overtime after 12 hours. I know we're going to get a meal break at 6. So all those things are great. And I do think like workers' rights are important. But I think it's a big decision to think about whether or not that is the right decision for you. So a lot of people that come up through the camera union join as a loader, and then I guess that might not even be true anymore as we like move away from film. then they become a second assistant camera, then they become a first assistant camera, then they become an operator, then they become a cinematographer. And that's what I started doing when I first moved to New York. And then I decided I just wanted to be a cinematographer. And you can do non-union work. Right now, having done this job for 15 years, I get hired as a cinematographer on non-union work. If union jobs were calling me, I would take them, you know? So I did want to put in a plug. I'm on this chat of 10 female cinematographers. That's where I get a lot of my work. And I was like, hey guys, I'm giving this like talk tomorrow. What else should I say? And someone was like, oh, you should talk about unions and you should specifically encourage non-male, non-white, non-straight people to join, because I think a lot of times those groups of people historically shy away from unions because it is an old white boys club and it's changing, but slowly. So anyway, for me personally, I'm not getting called for union jobs at the level of work I want to do. However, that's also a way when I talk about this whole like structure of freelance versus not, like that is a way, those jobs pay a lot more and they can be a lot more steady, right? Like if I did have a family and I did need to make X amount of money, I would probably focus more on finding an operating job on a TV show if I wanted to never see my family and work 6 days a week, but make money to support them. So that's that thought. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna go through the last section that I have here, and then I can say a little bit after 12, and you don't have to, and do a few questions. Okay, and so this one's like the messier part. This is just me like practical tips and life reflections. All right, take it or leave it. Again, just my opinion. I think it. Oh, hold on. You have to see it too. So screenshot this, look at it years later. Here are my practical tips and life reflections. It's nice to have some money. I would suggest having some money in the bank if you can, because that affects what jobs you're going to take, right? Like you never know when your next paycheck is coming. The way I deal with that potential very stressful thing is I save a chunk of money here, right? And then I'm like not as like panicky month to month. All right, I get paid up front if I have a new client, 100% upfront if they're overseas. I hate talking about money. I don't want to track anyone down for money. It's terrible. This just is ask people questions spelled wrong. I'm going to do these kind of quick so we get to do a little bit more Q&A. Okay. This is a tough one. Unconscious bias is really real, and gender discrimination is really real. And I remember working on this documentary about the Equal Rights Amendment. There would be an amendment in the Constitution that said women are equal, have equal rights to men, which I don't know if it's passed now, but it wasn't passed 3 years ago. And a lot of this one's a little tough. We talked to a lot of people, and a lot of people in college, a lot of women in college were like, cool, yeah, I feel equal. Everything seems fine. And I think a reality is a lot of people don't really face the reality of gender discrimination until they get to the workforce. And I'm saying gender, but I'm sure there's racial and sexual and all these other things too. But it's really real, right? Like I think 4% of cinematographers working on big movies are women. And unfortunately, I get hired mostly by women. Like men just don't call me. Like sometimes they do. Like there's definitely, whatever we call it, alternates to the rule, but it's usually women. Men will call me if it is a female project. They're like, oh, I'm shooting a project on women beekeepers. Do you want to do it? But they don't call me for normal stuff. They don't call me for regular stuff. And most of what is made is regular stuff. So like, I don't know what to tell you to do with this, but like, there's just a lot of hard truth, I think, coming, right? When I think a lot of times, like, you enter the workforce and then you find out that like, oh, the guy's getting paid a lot more. And like that still happens, right? Or that you people second guess me all the time. I have to be really nice on set, right? Like if I was a male DP, in my experience, you can be like, put that light there and move on to the next thing. And sometimes as a woman, I have to be like, hey, I think it'd be a really good idea if we put this light over there. And sometimes they'll do it. And sometimes they're like, oh yeah, but what about over here? And like, I want us to have a creative conversation about it, but sometimes you have to go fast. And so sometimes there's just like, it's just, this one's my hardest point to talk about because I don't want to like depress people. And obviously you're all intelligent humans and you know this to a certain level, but like, it's just true. And it's not like it's not true in other industries. So I think it's good to be aware of. I think if you're someone from a group that is more classically respected, I think you can do a lot, right? Like for straight white men on the call, like please hire people of color. But it's a hard industry because it's hard for everyone, you know, like making it in film is hard no matter your gender or race. So it's, in my experience, it's not some like guys don't want to hear about how it's harder for other people because it's also hard for them. It's just a tricky one. It's, you know, people have talks on this for days. All right, practical life skills. I suggest developing alternative skills, right? Like I also write. Maybe, I don't know, you probably aren't gonna, it's hard to work on set forever and it's hard to make money, right? So maybe it's nice to have alternatives. I'm terrible at networking, but I think the best networking is when people follow up, right? You meet a bunch of people at the party next day, maybe send them all an email about what you do and how you can help them. And this is a like, do what I say, not what I do. There was a woman who started working, it was an intern for me in lighting. And after she interned on this film, she sent me an email that was like, I loved working with you, or I respect working with you so much. I'd love to do it again. And I'm sure she sends that to everyone she works with, but it like worked. I was like, oh, yeah, I really like Kate. And I hired her on my next job. And she sent me another similar email. I can't hire her anymore. She costs too much, you know? But it's like, you can't just go to the party. You got to reach out. It's fun to just go to the party. All right, maintain connections. This is actually really true. Like we so often look for new work, and it'd be great to just work with the people you worked with before, right? You already have a working style. They already know you and trust you. Like I would recommend reaching back out to people you've worked with before when you get to this point. All right, be paid for your time, get experience. I cannot stress enough, if you want to be a filmmaker, I would make so many films in college. Like, I think this is a case of like, you don't know how good you have it, right? You have all this great gear, you have this resource, right, of Troy and Swem. You have the real resource of your friends who, you know, might be excited to work on your film with you. My friend, right now, if I wanted to go make a film and have my friends work on it for free, even if they were willing to do that, like they might get hired to do another job. Like it gets much more complicated. So like if I could give you one little wish, it would be like maybe have 3 good projects coming out of school, right? Because you can't just say I'm a director, right? You can't just say I'm a cinematographer. You have to have done it. You have to be it and have some proof of it. And I think you probably don't know how dope you have it right now, right? With like locations and other students and mentors and gear. Just do it. This is going back to as I was writing much to my little sister. Enjoy your life. Recommend people. It's not all self-serving, but when someone introduces me to someone and they write a glowing recommendation for me, like I just like I feel so nice, and I want to return the favor. Yeah, it's better to finish something at 80% quality than it is to have a super high quality project that isn't finished. And I think certainly something a flaw I have is like wanting something to be really, really good, almost at the level where it's going to take too long. And I might speak sharply to the art director because it's not as good as I want it to be until they just get a plant. And like, that's not cool, you know, like it's in a long-term career and life vision, right? I'd rather have good relationships with everyone and have something 80% quality and finished than have it be 100%, but I was mean to people and they're not going to recommend me, and it's just not a good way to be. Be easy to work with, be cool under pressure. Set's a lot of pressure. Just you're probably nicer and smarter when you're well rested. Film, you don't always get a lot of sleep, right? Because it's these long turnarounds. And I totally notice that I'm like a much worse person when I haven't slept and I'm not bringing my best creative game. So try to sleep on film sets. That's it. I know I ended at a bit of a ramble. Let's see, any other questions in this chat? No, let's want to take a second and think if you have questions for a moment, and then, but that's all I got, y'all. What's something that you wish I covered? Or just,
Chloe has a question. Chloe, you can go ahead.
I wanted to ask more about, oh, hello, my name is Chloe. I wanted to ask more about like the cinematographer chat that you have. Are you in multiple chats like that? Because I follow on TikTok, I try to follow a lot of people who are in the industry and give tips. And they say that like WhatsApp groups are very popular and that's how people get jobs. And it's normally like word of mouth, but it's like specifically these chats where you kind of like find people. Like I wanted to ask how you found that group and are you in other groups as well?
yeah, I think it's a great idea to do. I feel like I'm gonna go make a note that says, join other chats. This one just started organically. It was just a female cinematographer friend of mine. Added about 5 of us, and now it's at about 15, and I wish it was about 10. And this is the only real one I'm in. I'm in another like film shop group, which is like a group of filmmakers that meet once a week. Actually, if anyone wants to write down film shop for the future, it's a group of filmmakers that meet once a week per season, and you workshop a project, right? So I'm going to show a rough cut of something and I'll get notes, and other people show drafts, but they also have a spin-off chat to get jobs. And yeah, I don't have a lot of like advice or suggestions on it other than totally agreeing that in this case, it's, 10 to 15 people that I know. And when we have a job we can't do, we recommend each other for it. And that is far and away where I get most of my work, as opposed to like jobs coming up in a film shop group or someone reaching out to me directly. So like, I don't know how to tell you to find that, but you should find it and you should make it, right? Like, so I started a Facebook group called Empowering Women Documentary Filmmakers, and it's for anyone with more than 5 years experience that connects, that is a female or is not a man. And that was, and that's mostly as a job sharing resource, right? So I think maybe the deeper point here is that I would recommend to you reaching out to the level you're at, right? Like it wouldn't help you to be in my cinematographer group, right? Like you're well, actually, I'm so sorry. I don't know. maybe you're a very experienced cinematographer, but probably that's too high, right? The jobs that are coming up there, like, and I think a lot of us, when we network, we aim kind of high, and those people both, like, we don't have that much to offer them because we're coming from this less experienced position, but they kind of don't have that much to offer us because they're not going to have a job to recommend that fits us. So I think a big piece of advice is just like, connect to the people at your level and you're all going to rise together, right? So like, whoever your friends in your screenwriting group are now, maybe in 5 years, they're working in the HBO showroom or whatever the hell your passion is. So like, I think that, and they're much more accessible than like trying to connect to a famous DP. So yeah, no, I think if you don't have it, like make it, right? Like ask 5 of your friends to be on a chat where you like throw around creative script ideas or whatever it is.
Thank you.
Ampersand Festival, do you have a question?
Yeah, hi, it's me, Ampersand Festival. This is a question from me as Hallie, the intern. I want to know, since you're a freelance, since you do so much freelance, do you have any specific like insurance policies or any sort of like coverage that you think is important for someone to have for equipment or for their own policies? Because you're not necessarily, I don't think you're necessarily getting those sort of healthcare benefits or anything. So like, is there any sort of policies that you would recommend someone who's going to do for higher
Yeah.
work to get,
I'll tell you what I do. I mean, I don't know too much about this. I have Medicaid, whole person's insurance. It's fantastic. It covers everything for health. And then for gear, I have my own insurance for my gear. Whenever I do, oh, this is actually a good note. Then whenever I do a job, I ask that it be covered by their insurance. But as a backup, I have it for mine. And I'll just say something I didn't know. I thought like I made a claim on my insurance 6 years ago. My camera like fell over in a windstorm at Standing Rock. And they paid out, they paid me money to have it fixed. And I thought that it would maybe make my insurance go up next time, right? And instead, it made them drop me. So that's something that can happen, right? So in retrospect, right, I could have, I think Al Jazeera had hired me for a very small amount of money, probably maybe somewhere between $100 and $400 while I'm living in South Dakota to go film something. And I bet if I had thought to ask in the beginning, I bet they would have covered me on their insurance. But instead, I was just like, oh, I'll just run out and do it. And then I had this accident, and then that insurance company won't cover me anymore. So I did, that's like kind of a big life lesson. Like, I just thought you had to pay more. Like, no. So that's what I have for gear. And then I will say that I don't know, there's a level of this I don't know, like, that gets kind of complicated and that I think has changed about like workers' comp and freelancer insurance. And then there's a whole thing about like, so my name's Lauretta Prevost. Am I working as just me, or do I want to make a little LLC and have everything go through my LLC? This might be a lot to try to fit in this, but it probably only costs you about $300 to $500 to make an LLC. And the reason I think it's a good idea is that if I did go through that company, if I ever got sued, they can only take the money from that company. I made it when I went to Standing Rock because the corporations were suing. There's a fear that the corporations would sue journalists. So I was like, okay, well, like that's why I particularly did it. But also, like, you're gonna mess up. Like, I've been doing this for 15 years. I'm probably gonna make like a big mistake at some point. And I haven't been sued, but so that is why I would recommend going through an LLC, which I set up but I haven't done. And there is something about, there's some complicated level in there of workers, of needing workers' comp insurance or not, but I don't know enough to answer it. I have my gear covered.
Right. If anyone has any last questions, please send them in the chat that I can read off, or go ahead and raise your hand. Otherwise, I think we've had a very good panel. I'm gonna give you guys like a minute.
Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
I had a good time.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here with us. Is there any good place for anyone to continue contacting? Like, if they want to contact you after, I can always
Sure.
resend that message that you sent in the beginning of the chat for people who may have joined after.
Yeah, you did it. Yeah. If anyone wants to send me an email, I will send you that sprawling Google Doc. And feel free to holler out with questions. And yeah, and I would say, like, what is a good place to find internships in the film industry? All right, Melinda, what do you like? What? Give me a little more. What do you want to do? What kind? It's too broad. I'll give you a second. I'm a big believer in making your own luck, right? Like, such as marketing or production. I think you should think about what you're getting out of it, right? And are you actually learning from this experience? Where would I send you to find a marketing or production internship? When I was at William & Mary, I did one day as an intern for some production that came through, and I asked that person for a letter of recommendation. And then when I moved to New York City, I had my like one little letter of recommendation. So that like really served me, I guess. Where would I find a marketing or a production internship? I mean, I do think people like having some level of connection. So like, I know there's not a ton of, it's not like there's a pipeline of William & Mary alumni that go hugely into film, but there are some, right? And I don't know if Troy wants to jump in. There's some Facebook alumni groups. I'm not sure I'm in them, but there's also a William & Mary alumni newsletter. You can send me an email and I can connect you to that. So, if you wanted to take the time in your life to research people that are in that alumni network, then I think you have a bit more of an in to be like, oh, hey, I'm disciplinary too. Is it, you know, if they're doing something that you think is interesting. I think my main thing would be like just ask, right? Like I think so often, like at least for me personally, maybe I'd meet someone and be like, someday I'll email them, like just email them now, you know, like they're not thinking about you, like just bother people a little, like politely, but bother people. They'll stop writing you back if you're bothering them too much. Like it's fine. Are you in Virginia? If you're in, I guess what's cool about marketing is it seems like you could probably do that anywhere in the world. I'll tell you something interesting that's a little bit of a confidence game that you can take or leave. A DP friend of mine had a girlfriend, and together she wrote many creative agencies in New York. A creative agency, I don't even know what a creative agency is, but maybe they're the middleman that gets hired to make ads and stuff. She wrote many creative agencies in New York and said, oh, Johnny is back in New York and he's really interested in working with you. And maybe they got 5% replies. And when they got a reply, they Googled the company and they researched it a lot. And then he went and he had a meeting with that company. And in the course of a year, his rates tripled. You know, so I don't know if that's great advice, but it's sort of like no one's lying. Like just having that slight like middle fan, it's like, oh, Johnny's really interested in working with you, served them really well. And I guess I'm mentioning it because, yeah, just reach out, right? Like kind of the way like leave your house. Like many more interesting things happen to me when I leave my room and walk around the city in Mexico where I'm in than when I just stay in my room. So like I think like I would say, like in a best case scenario, decide who you want to work with and then offer to work with them for free. What a like gift that you're giving.